Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2004 romantic comedy titled Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason. Now, this, of course, is the sequel to the ever popular Academy Award winning movie Bridget Jones's Diary. And let's see, the movie runs for an hour and 47 minutes long. It is directed by Beebon Kidron, who replaced Sharon Maguire. The script was done by Helen Fielding because the novel was actually based on Helen Fielding's best selling novel. Also contributing to the penmanship includes Andrew Davis, Richard Curtis, and Adam Brooks. It is produced by Tim Bevan, Eric Fellner, and Jonathan Cavendish. The score was done by Harry Gregson Williams, the cinematography by Adrian Biddle, and the editing is done by Greg Hayden. And the stars of the movie are Renee Zellweger. Let's see, what's this day? We have Colin Firth, Hugh Grant, Jim Broadbent, Gemma Jones, and Jacinda Barrett. Now, the whole Bridget Jones uproar emerged in the 1990s when Helen Fielding's newspaper article about a fictitious single lady later materialized into a best-selling novel, and it was hit with a positive note upon the critical mass. Bridget, who was fixated on losing weight and finding Mr. Right, rehashed her story about the triumphs and failures, along with her cynical humor, which quickly made her mark famous. But of course, as a rule of thumb, a best selling novel will surely likely be chewed up by the film industry, and sure enough, in 2001, Bridget Jones's Diary was released. Sure, there was some doubt about casting an all American girl from Texas by the name of Renee Zellweger as the titular character, and it was more British than fish and chips. But she did exceptionally quite well for herself, with, of course, strong support from her male leads, including Colin Firth and Hugh Grant. But enough about the first film. The emphasis is on the second film, The Edge of Reason. Now, of course, it's a follow up to the first film, basically, but through different sets and scenarios. So, if you're a fan of the first film, the second one will be of a liking as well, even though the humor and the quality has been altered here and there. So we start the story with Bridget, who's now dating Mark Darcy. It's a pickup from the first film, played by Colin Firth. And we get the assumption that we have that storybook happily ever after. Right? Well, not exactly. Bridget has suspicions that Darcy is being flirty with his new intern, played by Jacinda Barrett. And the once lovable and naive Bridget has kind of fallen to the edge of being borderline self destructive. It seems that her insecurities and her neuroticism and her uptight demeanor, it seems like in this movie, it seems to just keeps getting the better of her. Her clumsiness, her ineptitude, her insecurities, her self doubt, her pessimism, and deflated self esteem has been quickly expunged right before her eyes. And yes, does tend to get a little bit overwhelming. So she breaks up with Darcy and she ends up taking a journalist job and is assigned to Thailand, where she eventually winds up in the arms of Daniel Cleaver, a person who she so loathed from the first film, he is back again, played by Hugh Grant. Now, if you ever read the book The Edge of Reason, Hugh Grant's character Daniel Cleaver is really not that much in this movie. I mean, in the book. But he does make an appearance in this movie, but that is basically because of Hugh Grant and his charismatic. And I guess to make the story a little more compelling, we do need kind of a bit of an antagonist. And Hugh Grant is just a perfect, charming antagonist to be in this story, even though he is kind of a bit of a misogynistic dickhole. But the question is, will she ever reconcile with Darcy, or is her mindset on the more willful Cleaver? Taking over the directing job, like I said, from Sharon Maguire, Beebon Kidron, the direction moves out of the London surroundings as our protagonist ventures into the streets of Germany and Thailand. The main change is that, unlike from the novel, Daniel Cleaver actually returns, and like I said, simply for good reason, because it's nice to see Mr. Grant convey his charismatic charm and to revitalize the magic from its predecessor. I guess without Daniel Cleaver, the story would have been just a wonton movie of Bridget constantly falling flat on her face. Is that entirely a bad thing? No. Many people, of course, were taken aback from that, from the fact that it seems that our beloved protagonist, Bridget Jones, has become kind of a shell of her former self. Well, for good reasons. Sometimes not all stories end with a storybook happily ever after. Do you think that for once that in fairy tale stories our beloved Prince Charming is all that charming? Is he all that, one woman man type? You never know. He may probably have secret affairs. He might probably be a closeted promiscuous individual who's probably flirting with all kinds of women across the kingdom. And who wouldn't? He's blessed with royalty. So if you think that every story has a happily ever after, the reality bites back. And sometimes it's not pleasant, it's not kind, but it's the truth. So, though not as strong in the romantic comedy as the first film, it kind of teeters off into a little more slapstick territory. We are not particularly placing the blame on Kidron on that. The script does indeed lose its charm and its focus. And though we have grown into Bridget, and we hoped in the end that she truly finds happiness to whoever she's with, whether it be Mark Darcy or Daniel Cleaver, or maybe even just be happy on her own, whichever the case may be. I'm not going to give away any kind of spoilers. If you've never seen the movie, I'll let you see for yourself what happens in the end. So we know that, though not her fault to ruin herself, we actually, in the end, feel a little less empathy for Bridget. We're also doubtful that she's not going to return to Darcy's arms, even though it's clear that he is still madly in love with her, and that this whole incident between him and his new intern is completely misconstrued, and that there really is no need for her to feel insecure about herself, and that there really is, and that he really does have feelings for her. I don't think there was no need for her tirades and her reason for fear and paranoia, but when you're in a brand new relationship, it is actually quite natural that people do have this fear that, whoever you're dating is, it's sometimes hard to determine whether the person who you're dating is an honest individual or dishonest. Not just for guys, but girls too. They also feel that same way too. Everybody kind of feels that kind of way. I mean, if you feel that you put your faith and trust in a person who you love and they turn against you, it's sometimes hard to gain back that faith and trust if you decide to move on to another person. How do you know who the next person is if he or she is any better? You don't know. And that doesn't mean you have to go on the Maury show and take a lie detector test to see if you're telling the truth or if you're telling a lie. Yes, that's right. Maury Povich does talk like that. But aside from doing my Maury Povich impersonation, I will go back to Bridget Jones's sequel here. On the plus side, and like I said, I'm going to tell you something, that I really did enjoy this movie quite a lot. I kind of loved a bit of the slapstick stuff that happened in this movie. Okay, maybe I thought it started to become a little wanton and repetitive to see her fall flat on her face. But, you know, hey, it had its good comical moments, and on the plus side, the principal three stars seemed to be somewhat quite at ease in their respected roles. It's almost as if like they could be performing the roles in their sleep. The chemistry between the trio of Renee Zellweger, Colin Firth, and Hugh Grant were equally sublime like in the first, and is and that is the main traits that make this movie the way it is. No strangers to this kind of genre. Hugh Grant's been kind of playing this role for the past 25 years. Colin Firth, hey, what a coincidence. He's played Darcy in the 1995 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. He's been in many romantic comedies throughout the years. Renee Zellweger, she could play this role in her sleep as well. And stay tuned because sometime later out this year there's going to be a trilogy to the Bridget Jones franchise. Yes, coming soon to the theaters, there's going to be Bridget Jones's Baby. So for all you Bridgetites out there, stay tuned for that. They just seem right at home and they can convey the deadpan humor that the romantic comedy has to offer. And sure, films like this, okay, maybe they're not action-packed or suspenseful, in spite of the little squabble, like, at the fountain scene. Remember, once again, Darcy and Cleaver have a little bit of a scuffle at the fountain scene. That's probably, like, where the only action is. The comedy and the romance depicted here are definitely boosted to some level. In spite of the negativity by the critics, to be honest with you, it's not entirely bad. Even though it's not an abomination to the franchise. Sure, it's still not as fresh and as original like the first film, but still, you know, it took another angle. It took another turn. I mean, if it would have just stayed at the basic standard romantic comedy without a little bit of slapstick, then it's just a repeat from the first film. It would be like, why bother watching the sequel if they're not gonna do little twists around? And maybe that could have been the strength to some people, and to some people it could be the weakness. So what? Just sit back and enjoy it. Take it for what it is. It's not entirely a bad movie. I enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, I'm sorry for you. I mean, hey, it's your opinion. You're entitled to it. I didn't think it was that bad. I don't mind watching romantic comedies. As a film critic, I watch movies of all avenues. I don't I don't have any kind of biasy. And in the end, I actually had a lot more fun watching this movie than the first one. The first one was, to be intrigued. This one actually was a little more fun, a little more energetic, a little more spontaneous. Maybe it didn't have that same commercial success as the first, but at least this one actually had something that I could sit back and have a few more laughs. And if you can make me laugh in a movie, then you've done something special. So what if this movie is formulaic? It works well on what you would expect from a romantic comedy. The cast are in their comfort zones, and they come off naturally in that way. Sure, it's often compared to the first film, but if you can overcome the fact that it's a sequel, it really shouldn't disappoint. It's not really my genre of a comedy. I prefer the slapstick part, which is actually kind of something I liked about this movie than the first one. It's still a good watch if you give it a try. Who knows? You may just like it for what it is. I think if you guys just take your heads out of your asses, you will realize this movie is a great follow-up. Of course, it's not as good as the first, but it's still something you could take into consideration that you could sit back and watch for a more casual purpose. And if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, for that reason, I give it an 8. So I guess this ends my writer review, and thank you all for listening in. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Carrot Writers saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.